out. Now, the greater part of the day from 12, actually 1 o'clock until 6, we were at the Mark Hopkins Hotel for a conference of psychologists and persons who have been sexually molested, who have been victims of satanic rites, whose cases now, some of them are in a court, a matter up in San Francisco Bay Area that linked to national, international problems, actually. And this conference was set up by Felix Polk, the parent.
A suburb of San Francisco, but their life was far from perfect.
Since she was 14 and a half years old, was deprived of the natural progression.
Son Eli says that over their 30-year relationship, that control turned downright abusive.
I know who my father was. I can certainly testify to, every single thing, he ever did, from the physical to the extremely, he was extremely abusive.
But according to Eli, his father did not want to separate from his wife.
He thought it possible to be that they would get back together again.
Reconciliation.
Exactly, and she told him it wasn't going to happen, and I believe he snapped.
People are saying I stabbed him 27 times. I didn't.
He and his wife, parents of an abused child, sexually abused child, and several other psychologists and 2 people from the McMartin School from Los Angeles, talking about the satanic rites that the children go through in the nursery school, such as seeing other children cut up and the penis cut off and put in the mother's mouth, and the baby's child is wrapped up and smashed, the bones are smashed, and then it's burned in front of these children. And there are there are cassette tapes of this conference that we attended. It was all day. The tapes, 3 tapes for the entire conference are $20. You can write to Conference Recording Service, 1308 Gilman Street, Berkeley, California, 94702. You can break it up into 3 different sections of the conference, $7 each, but it's terribly important to hear the whole thing if these subjects interest you. And maybe in the next few weeks and after this evening, as I get into the material, the subject will very much begin to interest you. 2 of the people attending this conference were parents of sexually abused children that were involved in satanic rites, and I'll tell you who was taking these children from the daycare center at the Presidio in San Francisco. And one of the parents, a father, is a nuclear physicist for the Army. They had the child at the Presidio Daycare Center, and the other is a dentist, Captain Mike Tobin, a graduate of West Point. And, of course, there were satanic rites and abuse of children at the nursery schools in West Point this past year at the very military academy, and that was hushed up as much as it could be. Now the case is moving identical circumstances to San Francisco and the Presidio, and maybe there will be more attention there because San Francisco is more sophisticated in getting action, political activists on these matters. The organization that these people have formed is called Enough. It's to alert people to the horror of violence against children, the failure of the criminal justice system to protect the children, and what interested me, there were young adults and teenagers that were sexually abused, but these are small children who in nursery school and very young, 4 to 6 to 8 years old. And the organization feels that there is a mass movement entirely across the United States and in Germany and so forth of people abusing children. And the common denominator of all the people who had been abused or whose children had been abused was that the law enforcement does nothing. The local police, the district attorney, the prosecution, there's nothing set up in courts for children's rights. And, of course, I went into the collusion of the Justice Department, the police department with Son of Sam, and the Manson family, and the cases that I have studied because the law enforcement did nothing. But now there are parents who are establishment, can't be more establishment than military, nuclear physicist, and a dentist doing surgical work for the Army up in San Francisco. And I'm going to tell you in the weeks to come about some of that conference. They had a reading list. If you want to write to the organization for literature or help them, it's called Enough. The parents decided, and the psychologist and his wife, who decided to get this together and realized that their child had been sexually abused and that they were trusting the people at the nursery school who were in charge of him, they formed this organization called Enough, P.O. Box 71-2550, Shattuck Avenue, Berkeley, California. 94704. And if you write to them and get a reading list and become educated on this, and even on our Monterey Peninsula, I was shocked that the San Francisco Chronicle that's delivered to my home didn't have the articles all last week that were in the San Francisco Chronicle on the newsstands. The first edition that comes out was kept from the people who got it delivered at home. Now, they spoke about ritual abuse indicators and fear of children when they afraid their house will be burned or their parents will be killed, and fear of blood, and they talk about drinking blood, and they've been eating feces and drinking urine, and fear of bathtubs or having their hair washed, and afraid of needles because they're getting injections right at the Presidio Army School and then taken off the Army base to the head of a satanic organization, a man I'm going into, who works for the Defense Department and takes NATO, top NATO people or members of his group through rituals of the Waffen-SS. They warned about children writing numbers backwards, letters backward, seeing satanic symbols that are being put upon them, inverted crosses, the number 666 if they're writing it. They warned about preoccupation of death. These are little tiny children. Then the parents are finding these symptoms and warning about, talking about animals being hurt or killed, and descriptions of dismemberment of animals, which they are witnessing, and they going through the trauma of physical and sexual abuse. Sexually transmitted diseases is a possibility, and they witness sadistic behavior, harming animals, harming other children, and some of these children, there is a fear that magic has been implanted into them, and they are fearful of bombs, monsters, ice, insects into them themselves. The children are afraid of those things. Now,
I stabbed him 4 to 6 times.
If you admit you stabbed your husband 4 to 6 times, not 15, not 27, not 700, but 4 to 6 times, why did you do that?
I was on my back. He was stabbing at me with a knife. I managed to get the knife away from him and to defend myself.
Eli says Susan had no motive to kill his father, and with his grandmother Helen, reenacted what they believe happened at the pool house.
My father was on top of my mom, holding her down.
But Ivan Gold, her former co-counsel and partner of Susan's now former defense attorney Dan Horowitz, says the fact the police were not called immediately might work against Susan.
That is very damning evidence that this incident was not reported for 36 hours.
Ritualistic murders. Oh, getting back to Dr. Polk 1 minute, because this son of Sam and John Wheat Carr comes to mind. He was the gentleman who planned the meeting yesterday and is head of the organization called Enough. And after seeing in the newspaper all these things about Heinrich Himmler and the sexual assaults upon these young people, I called him in Berkeley. His name was in the San Francisco Chronicle telling about this conference. And I said I'd like to attend, and as I say, Barbara Honegger went up with me, and we really wanted to hear what this situation was. And Dr. Polk was the first speaker to talk about his son, and his wife talked about their son's abuse, just this little fellow, and the things that he's been able to say happened to him. And he's very tiny, but he's able to say that much. Dr. Polk began by saying that he was 9 years old when the war was over, that he lived in a concentration camp, that his mother and father lived in a concentration camp and had come to this country where he's a psychologist at Berkeley, in Berkeley, California, not associated with the university, but in private practice. And then he proceeded to monitor or be the host to all the various speakers and didn't once mention the newspaper articles relating to Heinrich Himmler, the Joint Chief of Staff. I thought it would be a political awareness of fascism with a capital F, fascism. But the very people that came from Germany weren't able to see the parallels, didn't want to talk about it, and I took a bare minimum of material to them, thinking that if they have an interest, they can call me. We'll see what happens. But when I showed his wife before the meeting, we went up early, that on 1978 I was talking about John Wheat Carr, who was the real son of Sam, that was helping with the murders and was linked to satanic cults. She said, well, how did you get that? It's just in the new book by Mr. Terry, The Ultimate Evil. I said, well, I have it at home in my files. Well, where did you get it? How did you know this? She says, we could be infiltrated. And she thought, her first feeling is that we were the enemy infiltrating the meeting, because I knew something that was out in 1978, by March 78, that is only coming out in a book in 1987. You can say you heard most of it always on World Watchers, years ahead of its time. She didn't believe how I would get it. I said, well, I would like you and your husband to come down, thinking that they'd be interested in the links of Himmler to the OSS, to Allen Dulles, to the Manson operations, and to Son of Sam and Palo Alto murders and San Francisco murders and witchcraft. But she just looked dazed, like, I want to be the head of this, or I want that Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame, but don't tell me facts that confuse me. So whether or not we hear from them remains to be seen. I took some very other valuable material about Nazis in the San Francisco police departments. I really don't know if they comprehended what I understood. But I showed her that about John Wheat Carr, and did a broadcast in 1978, number 307, and we're up to 831 tonight, on Tex Watson, the Manson family, their Christian indoctrination, and some more on John Wheat Carr, how he was murdered at the Army base, and so forth. I was talking about these things a long time ago, and I have a list of past broadcasts. It goes on, and I have the research. A article just came out recently describing the new book, The Ultimate Evil. 10 years later, the Son of Sam doubts persist. New book claims the cult was behind the slayings.
Dr. Frank Felix Polk became involved in the Satanic Ritual Abuse (SRA) panic of the 1980s and 1990s, and his role in that movement remains one of the most controversial aspects of his professional life. He publicly expressed strong beliefs that his own family, particularly his eldest son, Adam, had been victims of ritualistic abuse linked to a clandestine satanic cult. Polk spoke at a 1988 Bay Area conference on ritual child abuse, where he presented extremely graphic descriptions of what he believed had happened to his son, including allegations of rape, infant murder, and blood-drinking ceremonies. These claims were presented as first-hand accounts recovered during therapy. Polk further asserted that Satanists had infiltrated law enforcement and judicial systems, which he believed explained the lack of official action or evidence. Polk and his wife, Susan, later formed a support and advocacy group called Enough, for individuals who believed they had experienced ritual abuse. Their involvement connected them to the wider recovered memory movement, which encouraged the belief that traumatic memories, including those involving cult abuse, could be retrieved through therapy or hypnosis. Dr. Frank Felix Polk died on October 14, 2002, in the pool house of his family's home in Orinda, California, after a violent confrontation with his wife, Susan Polk. He was found with multiple stab wounds and signs of blunt force trauma. The circumstances of his death became the center of a highly publicized murder trial in which Susan claimed she acted in self-defense after years of alleged psychological and physical abuse, while prosecutors argued that she attacked him during a marital dispute. Their sons were divided in their accounts, further intensifying the drama surrounding the case. In 2006, Susan Polk was convicted of second-degree murder and later sentenced to 16 years to life in prison, leaving the details of Dr. Polk's final moments both legally settled and still.
She became a mature, more savvy lady, and Felix Polk became an older man. I think at that point, the marriage didn't have the bases, the foundation to continue.
Whatever the reason, Susan and Felix's constant bickering soon began to affect the boys.